Max Hargrove rolled over in bed, still tangled in his sheets like a burrito gone rogue. The sunlight streamed in through his window, illuminating the chaotic sprawl of clothes, coffee cups, and half-eaten takeout containers that adorned his apartment. Just as he contemplated the deep philosophical question of whether the pizza box was a suitable substitute for a trash can, his alarm clock erupted with a shrill scream, jerking him back to reality. "Ugh, you ungrateful piece of plastic," he groaned, slapping at the clock like it had personally offended him. Can't a guy sleep in peace without being assaulted by the sound of 1,000 screaming chickens? With a flick of his wrist, he finally silenced the alarm, but not before sending a cascade of papers spilling off his bedside table. His meticulously crafted notes for the day's mission fluttered to the floor like confetti at a very unfun party. Sighing dramatically, Max extricated himself from the sheets and staggered toward the coffee maker, which, like him, seemed to be having a rough morning. As he poured the coffee, he half listened to the local news blaring from the radio. Something about a meteor headed for Earth. Yeah, I'll save the world after I've had my caffeine fix," he mumbled. He couldn't remember the last time he'd had a good cup of coffee. Today was going to be no different. Max took a big gulp, grimacing at the lukewarm sludge. "Delicious," he remarked sarcastically, before hastily tossing back the rest and bracing himself for what lay ahead. Today was supposed to be a big day for him, a mission to stop that meteor from hitting Earth. Max was a time traveler, but not the cool, suave kind you see in movies. He was more like the awkward cousin who tries to impress at family gatherings but only ends up tripping over the punch bowl. As he readied himself, he could hear the clock ticking down ominously. He rushed through his morning routine, frantically throwing on clothes that barely matched. The fashion police would have a field day. "All right, time to save the world," he shouted to Whiskers, his sassy tabby, who was lounging indifferently on the couch. Whiskers flicked his tail, as if to say, "Good luck with that, buddy." Max snatched up his time travel device, a bizarre contraption that looked suspiciously like a toaster crossed with a smartphone. "Let's do this," he said, pressing the button with far more confidence than he felt. In an instant, he was enveloped in a swirl of colors, and the world around him twisted like a funhouse mirror. The familiar sensation of being flung through time was exhilarating, until it abruptly stopped. He opened his eyes, only to find himself staring at the ceiling of his apartment. His alarm clock screamed again, jolting him awake. What the? He sat up, heart racing. The coffee pot was still empty. No way. No way. Realization dawned on him with all the grace of a rhino on roller skates. He was back in bed, in the exact moment he'd just left. Is this some kind of sick joke? He threw the covers off and leaped out of bed, only to trip over his discarded shoes and land face first on the floor. Whiskers stared down at him, unimpressed. "Thanks for the support," Max muttered, picking himself up and brushing off the dust. Okay. Just breathe." He glanced at the clock. The same time, 6:30 a.m., greeted him like an uninvited guest. Great. I'm stuck in a time loop. Just what I needed. Determined not to let this ruin his day, Max went through his morning routine with exaggerated enthusiasm. He poured coffee with an extra flourish, took a deep breath, and tried to channel his inner superhero. "Today, I shall conquer the universe," he declared, eliciting a dubious look from Whiskers. After what felt like an eternity, he finally activated the time travel device again, bracing himself for the ride. This time, he arrived at the coffee shop, where the barista greeted him with a puzzled smile. "You're back already?" Max grinned, trying to play it cool. Yeah, Just thought I'd drop by for. Before he could finish, the ground shook beneath them, and an ear-splitting roar echoed in the distance. A meteor, fiery and enormous, hurtled toward Earth with all the subtlety of a lead balloon. Hey, can I get a large coffee to go? Like, really fast, he shouted, the urgency of the moment pulling him into action. The barista stared at him, bewildered, as he dashed outside, heart pounding. The chaos of the city enveloped him. People screamed, cars honked, and the sky turned an alarming shade of orange. Max's mind raced. He needed to save them, but how? He began yelling at everyone to run, but they simply stared at him like he was a mime trapped in an invisible box. Run. Meteor, he shouted, waving his arms like a deranged conductor. A few people glanced at him, then returned to their phones, utterly unbothered by the impending doom. Seriously? Max gaped at the indifference. You've got to be kidding me. With a deep breath, he launched into a dramatic speech about the importance of life, friendship, and avoiding fiery death by meteor. Unfortunately, his eloquence was lost on the crowd, who continued to scroll through their social media feeds, utterly unconcerned. Just as he felt the situation spiraling out of control, the ground shook again, and the world around him turned a blinding white. He was back in bed. What the actual? Max slammed his fist down in frustration, sending his coffee cup flying off the nightstand. It shattered against the wall, as if to punctuate his misery. This was going to be a long day. As he repeated the morning for what felt like the 100th time, Max became increasingly aware of the absurdity of it all. Each time he found himself back in that same moment, he tried different tactics to break the loop. Each attempt was met with either failure or an over-the-top, comedic mishap. He tried to convince a group of joggers to help him, but they merely thought he was an eccentric street performer. He even attempted to use a megaphone he found in a nearby park, only to be chased away by an angry dog. The repetition began to wear on him. The faces of the people he encountered, like the barista who was inexplicably giving him free pastries, and the elderly man who always walked his dog at the same time, began to blur together. Their quirks turned into a monotonous soundtrack of his looping life. Max's witty commentary turned into a desperate plea for someone to notice the sky falling. Then, one day, something shifted. As he stumbled through another morning, still reeling from the last round of failures, he noticed that Whiskers had a peculiar look in his eye. The cat sat regally on the windowsill, watching the world outside with a knowing gaze. Okay, what's your secret? Max asked, plopping down beside him. You seem to know more about time travel than I do. Whiskers responded with a nonchalant blink, but Max swore the cat smirked. Well, if you're not going to help me, he sighed, I guess I'll have to figure this out on my own. As he stared into the distance, the horizon shifting with hues of orange and pink, Max had an epiphany. Maybe this loop wasn't just about saving the world. Maybe it was about him rediscovering himself. And perhaps, just perhaps, he could find a way to reach out to Eliza, the old friend who now stood on the other side of the impending disaster. The thought was terrifying yet thrilling. With renewed determination, he prepared to face the next iteration of his day. Max woke up again, the same morning light spilling into his room, the same clock blaring its relentless tune. But today felt different. Today, he was going to break the cycle. He swung his legs out of bed, a new resolve coursing through him. He looked at Whiskers, who had returned to his usual position on the windowsill, grooming himself as if he hadn't a care in the world. You're right, buddy. I've been too focused on the disaster instead of figuring out how to stop it. He quickly got dressed, his clothes miraculously coming together in a semblance of style, as if some cosmic force had finally decided to help him out. He glanced at the time travel device, giving it a determined nod before he pressed the button. The familiar dizzying sensation enveloped him, and he was launched into the day ahead, his mind buzzing with a mix of hope and anxiety. This time, when he landed outside the coffee shop, he didn't rush. He took a moment to breathe, letting the atmosphere settle around him. The air was electric with the impending disaster, but he refused to let panic seize him. Instead, he strolled inside, where the barista was already pouring coffee, a hint of confusion still playing on her face from his previous antics. "Morning. Can I get a..." He paused, thinking. "How about a large coffee and, a piece of that pastry?" She blinked at him, clearly unsure whether he was joking or not. "You sure you want to eat that? It's interesting. I'll take my chances. Gotta fuel up for the end of the world, right?" "Right." She chuckled, handing him the coffee and pastry with a grin that suggested he'd somehow brightened her morning. With a wave of thanks, he stepped outside, coffee in hand, and surveyed the scene. People milled about, blissfully unaware of the doom that loomed over them. As he sipped his coffee, he formulated a plan. He needed to find Eliza. She was the key to understanding why the meteor was headed for them in the first place and how to redirect its course. Max navigated through the crowd, his heart pounding with anticipation. It felt like he was on a treasure hunt, and Eliza was the treasure hidden in plain sight. His mind raced with memories of their last encounters, back when they'd been friends working on groundbreaking projects. They had a camaraderie that had been overshadowed by competition when her ambitious plans started to clash with his own. "Focus, Max," he muttered to himself. "No time for nostalgia." He headed toward the science building where Eliza worked, his legs moving with purpose. As he arrived, he paused outside the glass doors, the atmosphere inside bustling with scientists and students alike, all busy with their tasks. Max took a deep breath and pushed through the doors, determined not to get sidetracked. That he found Eliza in her lab, her hair pulled back in a messy bun, surrounded by charts and holographic displays. She was so absorbed in her work that she didn't notice him approach at first. "Eliza," he called out, his voice cutting through the hum of technology. She looked up, surprise flickering across her face before quickly morphing into annoyance. "Max? What are you doing here?" "I need to talk to you," he insisted, stepping closer, his urgency palpable. "It's about the meteor." Her expression shifted, and for a moment, he thought he saw a glimmer of concern. "What about it?" "It's not what you think. We need to find a way to redirect it, not harness its energy." He paused, gauging her reaction. "You have to listen to me. I've been looping through time, trying to figure this out. Eliza, I know you want to save the world, but this isn't the answer. You're putting everyone at risk." His words hung in the air, filled with desperation and hope, her brow furrowed as she crossed her arms, skepticism evident. "Looping through time? Are you serious?" "Dead serious. You know I wouldn't joke about something like this. If we don't work together, people are going to get hurt." The fire in her eyes flickered as she considered his words. "How do I know you're not just trying to stop me?" "Because I care about you, Eliza. We used to work together to do good. You can't forget that." She hesitated, clearly torn. The tension in the air thickened, but Max pressed on, his voice softer now. "Remember when we used to brainstorm solutions for the climate crisis? We were in it together." Eliza's expression softened slightly, and Max seized the moment. "We can be in it together again. We just need to think outside the box." "Okay," she finally said, voice low. Let's say I believe you. How do you propose we redirect a meteor? Do you have a plan? He grinned, his heart racing at the breakthrough. I don't have all the details yet, but we can combine our research. If we create a gravitational pulse using the energy from the meteor, we might be able to deflect it. She studied him for a moment, then nodded slowly. All right, let's see what we can come up with. For the next few hours, they worked side by side, brainstorming and sketching ideas. Max felt a sense of exhilaration as they bounced ideas off each other, their synergy slowly returning. The laughter flowed freely, punctuated by the seriousness of their task. They were a team again, and it felt incredible. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, Eliza glanced out the window, her expression suddenly serious. Max, we need to hurry. We only have a limited window to execute this before it hits. Right. Let's make it happen. They gathered their materials, Max leading the charge with renewed vigor. As they moved quickly, he felt the weight of their shared past urging him on. With each piece of equipment they assembled, a flicker of hope ignited in his chest. But just as they were about to test their gravitational pulse device, alarms blared throughout the building, shaking the walls. What now? Max shouted over the noise. Eliza rushed to the nearest screen, eyes wide. It's an emergency alert. The meteor is on a collision course, and we have less than 30 minutes to activate our plan. Let's go. Max grabbed her hand, urgency propelling them forward. They raced through the halls, dodging scientists and students caught in the chaos. Outside, the sky had darkened ominously, the meteor visible as a glowing mass growing larger by the second. Panic surged through him, but he fought it down. Arriving at the rooftop testing area, they quickly set up their makeshift device. The gravitational pulse generator hummed to life, lights flashing and gauges bouncing as they worked in sync, adrenaline coursing through their veins. Okay, on my mark, Eliza said, her fingers flying over the controls. We're going to have to time this perfectly. If we miscalculate, don't think about that. Max interrupted, focused on her. Just trust me. Trust is in short supply these days, Max, she shot back, but there was a flicker of a smile on her lips. He squeezed her hand reassuringly. We've got this. Together. Fine. Let's do it. They both turned their attention to the glowing meteor, now a fiery ball against the darkening sky. 3, 2, 1, now. They pressed the button simultaneously, and a wave of energy surged from the device, illuminating the area in a brilliant light. Max held his breath, watching as the pulse expanded outward, hitting the meteor head-on. For a heart-stopping moment, nothing happened. The meteor continued on its trajectory, drawing closer, and Max felt his heart plummet. But then, the pulse collided with the rock, a shockwave rippling through the air. The meteor shifted, its course bending slightly, the fiery tail swirling in unexpected patterns. It's working. Eliza yelled, exhilaration clear in her voice. The meteor began to veer off, the trajectory altered just enough to avoid a catastrophic impact. Max felt a surge of triumph as he and Eliza cheered, their voices mingling with the relieved shouts of those below. But just as he reveled in their success, a loud crack echoed through the sky, and another wave of energy surged from the meteor, sending ripples through the air. What's happening? He shouted, panic creeping in again. It's destabilizing. We need to do something, or it will explode. Eliza's face was tense, fingers darting over the controls in a frantic effort to regain stability. Okay, let's recalibrate. Max yelled back, adrenaline pumping through him. Together, they worked feverishly, fighting against time as the world held its breath. Finally, with one last push, they managed to stabilize the pulse, redirecting the energy away from the meteor. It began to cool, losing its fiery glow as it continued on its new path, safely away from Earth. As the crowd erupted into cheers below, Max and Eliza shared a breathless look of relief, their victory palpable in the air. "We did it," she whispered, eyes shining with exhilaration. "Yeah, we did," he replied, grinning from ear to ear. But even as they celebrated, Max felt a nagging thought at the back of his mind. The time loop, what would happen now? He had changed the course of events, but would he still wake up in his apartment tomorrow morning, facing the same endless cycle? He glanced at Eliza, who was already starting to pack up their equipment. "What happens now?" he asked, uncertainty creeping into his voice. "Now," she echoed, her brow furrowed. "Now we deal with the aftermath and figure out how to avoid such a disaster in the future. But you know what? We'll do it together. We make a good team." As he nodded, a strange sensation washed over him. The world felt different somehow, more vibrant, and he realized he wasn't feeling the same sense of dread he had before. With a mix of hope and uncertainty, he stepped closer to Eliza. "I'd like that." With the sun setting behind them, casting a warm glow across the city, Max felt a sense of closure settling in. Maybe he wouldn't wake up in that same bed again. Maybe the time loop was finally breaking. As he took in the moment, a smile crept onto his face. "Hey, Max," Eliza said, breaking into his thoughts. "You up for a celebration? I think we've earned a drink or two after saving the world." He chuckled, feeling lighter than he had in days. "Absolutely. But I'm picking the place this time. No more second-hand coffee for me." As they descended from the rooftop, laughter echoing in their wake, Max felt something shift within him, a newfound sense of purpose. He glanced at Eliza, grateful for the rekindled connection, and wondered what other adventures awaited them beyond the horizon. And for the first time in a long while, he was excited to find out. As they stepped into the bustling streets, the world stretched out before them, vibrant and alive, and Max knew he was ready to embrace whatever came next. He had faced the chaos, and now, with Eliza by his side, he felt like he could take on anything, loop or no loop. And with that thought, he finally let go of the past, stepping boldly into the future.